Okay, so you're gonna wanna start with either an acrylic background or some type of wood sign. I believe it's MDF board. So it's similar to wood, it's a little softer, I guess. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is get your Neon Flex. I ordered this off Amazon. It comes in a ton of different colors. We chose, I think it's called Ice Blue. And what this is it's an LED strip. So this is what an LED strip looks like. And it's kind of in this like polymer plastic tubing, and that shines through. And then most of these don't come like this. They have an end that plugs into an adapter. This is the end that you typically plug into the light. So this is the start of the LED light. These are some wires that come with the Neon Flex. So you can use these, or you can order some off of Amazon, and I'll show you what ones I would recommend. I got some at Home Depot, but I wish I would have ordered it off Amazon. And then they also come with these little clips that you can glue and bend your LED light into the shape. And then they have these covers at the end that you can put on. So sometimes they have like 2 holes in it, and sometimes they're just plain covers here, so you could cut it if you needed to. So I also got this off of Amazon. It's a 12-volt DC adapter. So for this example, we'll go ahead and I'll plug this into here. But for my actual light, this goes directly into the light. And then the other thing you're gonna need is a soldering iron. So this I also ordered off of Amazon. So one thing to note with this one is it came with a little bit of a thicker tip, which was really hard to work with. So I ordered thinner ones. And then it's also gonna come with the solder wire. So this is just a little holder. This is a wet sponge. And then this is kind of, it's like a soldering paste. So it's flux. It kind of helps the solder wire go where you want it to go. And then Gorilla Glue for the gluing at the end. This was the wire I got at Home Depot, but I can show you why I wouldn't recommend it and what I would recommend instead. Okay, this is what I would recommend as the extra wire that you get. You can find this on Amazon. It's 24 gauge. It's going to be easier to connect to the LED light. Because it's thinner, and it also is more clear. So for those of you who want to use an acrylic background, this is going to be a better option for you. The kit that comes with this, red is positive, and the black, it's going to have a red stripe, is negative. So usually when you order wires, the one with the stripe on it is the negative. So you always want to keep positive to positive and negative to negative. Neon Flex light, you'll notice that the positive end is towards the top, so where the light will show through. I just cut this to show you guys. And then the negative is going to be towards the bottom. This is where you're going to put your soldering. It's here and here. So that's where you're going to attach your wires. So before you start, what I would recommend is just make sure that your Neon Flex lights. So normally, like I said, you would just plug it in to make sure it lights, but since I used that for my sign, we're going to test it this way instead. So remember, red's positive, black is negative. So you're going to touch the positive to the positive, the negative to the negative, and make sure it lights. So you can see this works. So we'll go ahead and we'll test this strip too. I find it easier to lie it flat because I can see my connections here. So we remember the positives towards the top where the light shines through. So this more like clear plastic rubbery material. And then negative is towards the bottom here. So we see that this whole thing works as well. Then always disconnect this because it's a live wire. Okay, So the basics of soldering, this is the solder wire, this is the solder iron. It's very hot, be careful when you're using it. But what you'll do is you touch this and it kind of melts, and you kind of want to drag it in the direction where you want it. This is just a sponge wet with water that you can kind of wipe the excess off or use a paper towel. So what I like to do is try to touch the area that you want to put a little bit on. So I'm touching the wire to the LED light there, and I'm kind of pulling in the direction where I want it, and you'll see that's solder wire on there now. And you got to do the same thing on the positive. And so now we have two areas where there's solder wire. And then we're going to take the positive to the positive, the negative to the negative, and we're going to melt these on, and then we're going to cover it with more solder wire to secure it. So this is already dried, so what you're gonna do, you're gonna get this a little hot again, melt it, and stick your wire in. Same thing, and stick your wire in if you can. And then what I'd recommend is always adding a little more if you can to try to secure that wire. And once there's like soldering wire material, it tends to flow better. Okay, then you let it dry for 5 seconds, and then you just make sure that it's secure. So I always tugged a little bit since you're going to be bending the wires in different directions, but that is how you solder. It is a little different with these ends because you are going to be taking the soldering tip and be kind of angling it in here, which can be difficult. Some of the areas, what you may want to do is just cut out a little hole right here so it's easier to access. If you're having a hard time getting the soldering wire to stick, what you can do is take a little bit of this, it's called paste, but flux. And then you're just gonna put a little bit in the area you want. And that helps the solder wire kind of flow to where you want. The soldering wire got hot and melted right where I wanted. Same thing here. And then it makes it easier to stick. Measure how long we want our first piece. So I'm gonna start up here. I make sure I have all the bends that I want. And then I note where I want it to end. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my marker here, put a little mark at that spot, and then that's where we're gonna cut. So you'll notice when you go to cut your neon light strip that there's all these black marks here. So you have all these black marks. You wanna make sure that you cut through the black line. Otherwise the LED light won't work anymore. So if you're a little short or a little long, go to one before or one after. So this is the mark we made right here. So that's where we're gonna cut. And I use just a cutting board and a kitchen knife to cut straight through. I think it's easier than scissors, but you can try and see what works best for you. So now that we made our cut, I always just make sure that the strip still works because I hate to get something all together and then it doesn't work. So we're just gonna check it before we get started, and we see it still works. So now we can go ahead and solder everything together. So we're first gonna start soldering this end. So we're gonna put this together so we can test it, and that'll be like our plug. And then we'll solder the next wire to make our connection. All right, so I went ahead and I soldered this all together here. So we're gonna make sure that this connection still works. And it does, so I'm gonna go ahead and unplug that. Sometimes if it doesn't light, it may be because these two wires are touching. I had that happen once, or the connection isn't quite right. That's okay, just melt off your solder material and then, you know, redo your connection. Or another option is sometimes there's solder material that can get in between these two connections and it's causing these two to connect, which will cause this to short, meaning your LED light won't light up. What I would do is I would go ahead and do my connection here. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the Gorilla Glue to put this down, and then we'll do our next soldering connection. So this is where that extra wire is going to come in. Like I said, I got this from Home Depot. Okay, so I went ahead and I cut my wire. This is really thick for those connections. So what I did is I cut this to the length I thought I needed. I stripped off the red coating, and then I separated it into two pieces. One we're going to keep as our positive wire, so it doesn't matter which one, just make sure you connect positive to positive. And one we're going to keep as our negative wire. The other way to do that is you can get longer wires like this. I've linked them previously, and you can just cut it to where you need, and you don't have to strip the coating off and go through all this. So that's what I would recommend, but I don't have that, so this is how I did it. When you do solder these, just be careful, either wrap it in electrical tape or use the excess coating to hold it, because these get really hot. Obviously they're conducting. The reason I made those wires thinner like this is because these are much easier to connect to this here than this is. Like, this is really, really thick. So if you try to connect this, it's like covering the whole thing, and you're more likely to get a cross connection. So what I did is I stripped that, and then I split this into like 3 pieces. And then I just twisted the wires together to make my own connections. Okay, so we're gonna take these wires and we're gonna solder them here. Back at this connection here. So the top is positive, the bottom is negative. Let's see if I can show you what it looks like. There we go. So that's where you're gonna be soldering. So sometimes, like I said, because those can be hard, you can cut a little opening here, no one would notice. For this first one, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna solder it here. I'm gonna wrap it down, back along the back of this, through here, and then I'll probably drill a hole here to pull it through, and then we'll do this part all the way down. Okay, so these are those thin wires I made. I'm using the red coating just because these get really hot, so either use the coating that you cut off or some electrical tape. I already did my negative wire, that's the bottom. I'm gonna go ahead and solder the positive wire here. But there we go, we got it back on. So then just check your wires, make sure they're not loose, and then I would just make sure that everything's still lighting. If it's not, those could be touching, but it's still lighting, so we're good. I'm gonna bend this back, so these wires will be back here. Mark where I wanna drill here, and we'll drill through, we'll pull the wires through, we'll cut them short, and then make our next connection. All right, so I actually wanted to show you a reason why electrical tape or those preformed wires are better. So we're gonna plug this in just to see if it works, and I will show you if it's not working why. So I wanted to show you that it's not lighting up right now. I have it plugged in, but if you notice, when the wires touch back here, it shorts it, but as soon as they're not touching, it lights up. So that's a reason to have like insulated wires or electrical tape so they don't cross and touch. And that's why it's really important if you're gonna drill a hole, again, insulated wires or electrical tape so they're not touching right in here, because if it wasn't and they were touching, it wouldn't light up. So now that we have our wire through, it's still lighting. We'll go ahead, make sure we have enough wire to hide back here. So kind of follow the curve here, make sure they're not touching. You can tape it down, you can glue it down, whatever's easier for you, whatever you like better, do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll measure this next section and get it connected. So about there, so that's where we're gonna cut. Okay, so at this point, this is where you need to decide how long you want these wires. You want them long enough to connect, but not long enough where if you put them in here, they're gonna touch. So I'm gonna go ahead, use my wire cutters, cut it short. I'll probably leave a little length and then push this back a little bit so you can't see them. This is where I cut mine. I'm gonna cut her. I'm not gonna film this part. You guys have already seen it. You kind of know how to do it. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll show you when we're all done. Just one more thing to remember, it's easier to put solder on this piece first. That's what I went ahead and did. You can kind of see it there. And then I put the tape on the negative wire. So I see that here. So I want to make sure that goes to the bottom and this is the positive and that'll go to the top. So I went ahead, I soldered that together. I just put the tape here just real quick to show you that I kept negative with negative and so that they don't cross. So we'll go ahead, plug it in. Let's see if it lights, and it does. So our connection's great there. So we'll go ahead, we'll glue it down. So I'm gonna push this up here. Okay, so once you have everything connected, my glue came loose a little bit, but once you have everything connected here, now is where we're gonna start our cursive. So I just measure everything out for the rest of this. Most likely it will take probably one strip. I probably won't do this into 2 strips. So we're just gonna go ahead and measure everything out and I'll show you how I do that. Measure this out. So our A, we're probably gonna do something like this. So I know I need that much, and then I can let that go, and then we'll come up with our M. We'll probably just go through once. You can do a little loop here if you want. Just make sure you measure that out. This one will go up twice, or down once, up once. Same with the I. And then when I did this, like for our name, I would glue things together like this. And then we'll come up with the L. Same thing with the L. I'll probably just loop it like this. And then we'll come together with the Y, and here you can choose to cut or you can choose to loop. It's up to you. And then you can choose to do it something like that, or you have your Y here. Oops. And you can choose to come around and do it like this, but just know you'll have to make a cut and drill a hole to finish that off there. But that's how I would finish everything. And then if you are gonna do something like a loop by the A here, what you can do is I usually try to cut it on this side, so I would start it from the other way. So you'd use the other end, but you basically just cut a little triangle in this part, not too deep, but enough where you get a little bit of that rubber gone. And it just helps you form those curves. So like that's how I did my H. It just helps it form a little easier. So, and you can make it deeper as you need. So that's how I would do it. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I can't wait to see all your finished products.